Welcome to the Commentary Podcast. Just a quick disclaimer, none of these opinions reflect the greater Phillipian board, but are our own opinions. Today we're discussing code switching at Andover, the second part of a larger mini Black History Month series. I have three wonderful guests joining me tonight. Let's start with names, pronouns, where you are from off campus, and what Black History Month means to you.
I can start. My name is Prince LaPaz. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a senior, and I live in Malden, and on campus, I'm in Hersey House. And Black History Month, to me, is a celebration month. It's a month to not only celebrate Black stories and Black people, but also to recognize and honor their history.
Hi, my name is Mayari Burt. I'm a freshman. I live in Thailand, and on campus, I live in Stowe House. Pronouns are she, her. And for me, Black History Month is really a day of commemoration, or a month of commemoration, and a time of really celebration and projection of Black arts, Black stories that should be obviously commemorated throughout the year, though this is just a time to solely focus on these arts and really see them in a different light and story.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Tolbert. I'm from Waltham, Massachusetts, pronouns he, him. On campus, I live in Taylor House, and I'm a lower. To me, Black History Month is a month to kind of recognize all the untold stories of Black history and kind of remember who we are, where we came from, and kind of celebrate our existence with each other.
And I'm the host, Michael. I am from South Carolina. I am a lower. I live in Feast. And Black History Month for me, I think, is everything everyone else already said, as well as just, celebrating my own skin and everything that comes with that. So now I believe we're all aware that an unfortunate part of the Black experience at a PWI, such as Andover, can be feeling the need to code switch, which to succeed socially or academically. Do you all notice code switching on campus, whether in yourself or others?
Definitely. I feel like when I'm surrounded by other Black people, I always feel like maybe that the language used in that kind of environment is different and kind of more laid back or relaxed in other environments.
I would say yes as well, unfortunately. For me, I've had an experience particularly with my writing. I previously wrote in a particular grammar, and I guess it was critiqued by my parents positively, and they embraced it just because it was kind of a reflection of that Black storytelling style. My first essay here was actually critiqued, and I had a few points off because of the grammatical structure. And I was really self-conscious about that because I thought I expressed myself how I would express myself, but that wasn't the structure that was being looked for. And so I guess there's just that need to code switch, I guess, because of the societal grading system, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'd say, adding on to what everyone else said, I feel actually for me personally, I think I do code switch, but unintentionally almost. I don't realize I code switch. Think again, we talked about earlier, it's comfortability, and I feel around certain people, I just feel more comfortable to talk more freely. Yeah.
I agree. I do notice code switching in myself. I think I don't necessarily, there's smaller instances of which friend group you're with, but I think one example of my life that has really affected me, that has to do with my race, is I am an immigrant from Uganda, and I grew up, my family and I immigrated to the United States. We immigrated to South Carolina, not where I would direct African immigrants, but you know what, that's what we did. And I remember I went to kindergarten, and it was a small private school. I got a scholarship and everything, and I went, and I had my little African accent, and it was ridiculed out of me. I guess inflections and certain things come back when I'm speaking to my parents when I hear it, but I think a lot about how that was a central part of my identity, and I understood that if I was gonna fit in the kindergarten social scene, that part of that identity would have to be shed, and I feel slightly bad for the Michael that, had to do that. So should code switching, especially at Andover, be generally suppressed, or are there positive connotations to consider?
I definitely think that code switching does have its positives and negatives. I think code switching should be a choice of the individual. They should not feel pressure to code switch by the environment or person, because code switching is also a way of expression. It's also a way of conveying your ideas that sometimes can't be expressed through a certain tone, with a certain vocabulary. So I think code switching should be embraced, though not.
I agree with what you said about code switching being like a form of expression. I feel like sometimes when I'm talking to like maybe my other Black friends, like I feel like they understand me on a deeper level when I'm able to express myself freely without kind of the suppression of like pressure from like others to fit in this certain kind of language or talk in a certain way that presents myself in a way that kind of they might want to see.
Yeah, and I think also adding on to that, a big part of code switching, or maybe not a big part, but a part of code switching could be like about jokes that you're making. And I feel like it might make some people uncomfortable if you're making certain types of jokes around like white people versus with your Black friends, Not that you have to like not make jokes around certain people, but just that you might feel more comfortable making those types of jokes around other people.
This is an example, like, I think a lot about in terms of like when I think about the positive like parts of code switching. My dad once just had this conversation with me, and he was like, Barack Obama would not have won president if he didn't speak a certain way, look a certain way, dress a certain way, act a certain way. And I think a lot about that because it's like, especially Black people, but all people of color, if you're going to get a job, if you're going to, win office, if you're going to, advance socially, advance in your career, advance in all these different aspects of your life, you have to succumb to certain outside, like societal norms. That's an example where I think like code switching doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but I think I just want to pose the question, then where is the line, I guess? How can you determine that I'm code switching because this is who I want to be for my own benefit, and not who I want to be because I want to seem appealing to the majority around me? How do we, especially as Black students at Andover, how can we support others? Because I wouldn't want to watch one of my friends shed a part of their identity because they think that that's something they have to do instead of something that they want to do or just as they grow.
I think one big part of like why we code switch is because people in society are programmed to think that like the way we may talk or the way that they talk is right or wrong, respectively. Like, I feel like people having those like connotations in their mind kind of result in like people who may not code switch not getting a job, or people who don't talk in a certain way not being considered as like prestigious or smart or intelligent because of the way that they speak, and not because of any other factors. And I think that like kind of trying to break down those barriers of like the connotations between like being intelligent and talking in a certain way or in a perfect English, it should be like broken down and kind of challenged in our conversations.
Yeah, and that reminds me of like going back to essays. That reminds me of how, for example, we like in many of my essays, my teachers have told me like not to use contractions, for example, where like instead of saying can't, say cannot, or instead of saying must have. And this reminds me of that, where like they're saying like, oh yeah, it's more proper grammar to not use contractions in formal writing, but why? Like what's the difference between can't and cannot? What's the difference between must have and must have? And yeah, who's saying that one is more formal than the other?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think code switching is kind of a societal construct. And in order to kind of debunk it, we're going to need societal, like an institutional change. Because, like, this, like you were saying about, like, in an educational setting, this has been, like, ingrained, like, historically into the institutions of education. And I mean, we could look through, like, to the roots of, like, scholastic institutions, like, where they came from. They were used to, so others could conform to something. And though it's unfortunate, that kind of sense of conformity has carried on to now, and it's subconsciously does encourage students to conform, and it doesn't. These constructs don't really allow people to embrace themselves or express themselves because of this societal connotation.
That's a great point. And I also think like on the flip side, I talked about this a little bit with the last group, but like before I came to Andover, I'd never been called not black enough. Um like that was just not something that like I'd experienced, and coming to Andover, that's something I've heard from other black students. And I think it's important that we don't think of code switching as just when we're speaking about code switching being as a result of feeling like you have to have these expectations pushed upon you. I We don't think about code switching as just switching to what the dominant culture is, but also to like a space like the SU, for example, on campus. Like I think we as black students, especially upholding and supporting each other, should really focus on how we embrace all different types of black people from all over the world, because especially at Andover, like black is a umbrella term for so many different things, like of African American descent, of African descent, of like all these different things. And those aren't all the same, and everyone has different background. And what can the adult side of campus do to combat this need students burden themselves with to assimilate to dominant culture?
Honestly, yeah, this kind of goes back to that kind of institutional change. I mean, it's also, yeah, it's really difficult. However, I think simply just accepting code switching is one step, just acknowledging that like it's something that's prevalent and it's something that many people will do, but also acknowledging if someone has a tendency to code switch like when speaking to you, like as an adult, maybe try to have a conversation, see if there's something particularly that makes them uncomfortable in speaking in their preferred manner or acting in their preferred manner.
I think one thing too is that teachers or like adults on campus can do is kind of embracing different kinds of languages like throughout their classes and like how they present scholarly work. For example, like in English class, maybe showing your kid or your students like a book that uses a different kind of dialect than you would normally see in scholarly work. Kind of like break down the barrier of like what can be considered academic and what can't be, so that code switching isn't seen as something that you have to do to be taken seriously in a scholarly place like Andover.
Yeah, and I think going along those lines of teachers embracing students' voices, I think also faculty and adults here on campus, they can just give more room to all students to just be loud and be cause a ruckus, just let their voice be heard and let them like just go free almost. Where Candy, I think of automatically as a great example of that, where like students there, they can be as loud as they want. They can do whatever they want there. It's a great space where like you can just be you. There's students studying while other students are like listening to music on a loudspeaker. And yeah, I think just more space for students to just show who they are and be students, be kids, be teenagers.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think like back to that academic part about it, like your essay, like that's so like I've been lucky to I have Mr. English as my English teacher, and he's very open-minded in terms of, your vernacular, your tone, your style, your structure, because I think he understands that writing is a reflection of the writer and what the writer believes and what the writer hopes to achieve in their writing. And I think that, I think having more teaching practices that follow that would be beneficial. And also like I think about like last year in English 100, I remember my English teacher and I think a few classes also had their students reading Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Yeah, that's like a great example of like a book that breaks the mold in terms of if we're thinking about like it's not just like Hamlet or something. It's like something different.
So I think also like encouraging discussion on this is also something very good. For example, like in my English class, it was like really eye-opening to me because we had just this class discussion where we compared like a scholarly definition of standard English to a Black scholar's definition of what should be standard English. And just kind of making that comparison and just like seeing it as it is really is beneficial. Like,
yeah, that's a great point. So thank you guys, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. That's a wrap on today's episode.